All right, let's just jump right into it. Grab your metaphorical magnifying glass because today we are putting on our detective hats and reopening what is frankly one of the most chilling cold cases in American history. We're heading back to the fall of 1982. Imagine this, an invisible killer is stalking the Chicago suburbs, and their weapon of choice? It's not a gun, it's not a knife, it's a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol, the best-selling over-the-counter pain reliever in America at the time. In this explainer, we're going to map out the evidence, the heartbreaking timeline, and the massive corporate fallout of a crime that literally changed global consumer safety forever. To really grasp the gravity of this case, you've got to put yourself in that atmosphere of absolute, unprecedented mass hysteria that gripped Chicago. I mean, the sheer panic is perfectly captured in the public safety flyers they handed out, which literally screamed, in bold letters no less, "Get rid of all Tylenol now." And this wasn't just media sensationalism, okay? Police were actually driving through neighborhoods, blasting their loudspeakers to warn people that a killer was stalking the aisles of their local stores. Hospitals were completely overwhelmed. Thousands of panicked citizens flooded in, terrified that the simple headache pill they just took was going to be their last. The message to the public was absolute and completely urgent. And honestly, that public panic, it was completely justified. The timeline here moves with a terrifying speed. Over the course of less than 48 hours, starting on September 29th, 1982, the horror just unfolded. It started with 12-year-old Mary Kellerman. She woke up with a cold, her parents gave her one extra-strength Tylenol capsule, and tragically, she was dead by 7 a.m. But it escalated so fast, leading to the unimaginable tragedy of the Janis family. Just hours after Mary passed, a 27-year-old postal worker named Adam Janis collapsed. Doctors actually thought it was a massive heart attack at first. So his grieving brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa gathered at Adam's house. The stress gave them both splitting headaches, so what do? They reached for the exact same bottle of Tylenol Adam had used. Stanley died that very same day. Teresa passed away 2 days later. Just think about that, an entire family totally devastated by a single tainted bottle. Over the next 24 hours, this nightmare just kept spreading through the suburbs. And look, we have to remember these aren't just statistics. Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, Mary Reiner, they were among 7 completely unrelated, totally innocent victims of this invisible predator, ages ranging from 12 to 35. Postal workers, mothers, students. It's their personal stories and that profound, lasting grief of their families that really serve as the emotional anchor for everything we're looking at today. They simply walked into a store to buy medicine so they could feel better, and they never came home. It is a deeply sobering reminder of the human cost behind this massive case. So, as detectives here, we have to ask, how on earth did the killer pull this off without leaving a trace? Well, the answer is in the vulnerability of the medicine itself. Back in 1982, extra-strength Tylenol was sold in these gelatin capsules, basically an easy-to-open 2-piece pill. The killer exploited this structural weakness perfectly. The working theory is they systematically pulled bottles off retail shelves, took them home, pulled apart the 2 halves of the capsules, filled them with something deadly, snapped them back together, and just returned the bottles to the racks for unsuspecting consumers to buy. The tampering was entirely undetected until it was far, far too late. And what exactly was that deadly substance? When investigators finally connected these rapid deaths to the painkiller, they rushed those capsules straight to the lab, and what they found inside was the true murder weapon. These capsules didn't just have a trace amount of poison in them. No, they were packed with up to 65 milligrams of pure potassium cyanide. The killer had literally dumped out the healing medicine inside that gelatin casing and entirely replaced it with this deadly white powder. Now, to put that 65 milligrams into perspective, we need to talk about the sheer malice involved here. That amount of potassium cyanide doesn't just kill you, it guarantees a swift, brutal death. Listen to this. That specific amount packed into a single capsule is roughly 10,000 times the lethal dose needed to kill a human being. 10,000. That tells us so much about our predator. This wasn't some tragic accident. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a highly calculated, ruthlessly efficient method to absolutely guarantee a fatal outcome for whoever was unlucky enough to swallow that pill. Adding to our case file, the FBI and a massive multi-agency task force had to figure out the logistics. How was the tainted medicine getting out there? Was it an inside job at the Tylenol factory? Actually, scratch that. The evidence pointed in a completely different direction. The poison bottles recovered in Chicago came from 2 entirely different manufacturing plants, one in Pennsylvania, the other in Texas. Because of that geographic impossibility, the FBI realized the tampering had to be happening right there at the retail level. Someone was physically walking into Chicago grocery stores and pharmacies, buying or stealing the bottles, taking them home to lace them with cyanide, and then quietly slipping those deadly bottles right back onto the shelves. Okay, let's step up to the suspect board and look at our prime suspects for America's most infamous unsolved crime. Really, only two major names emerge here. First up, James William Lewis. This guy actually sent a handwritten extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to, quote, stop the killings. He even owned books detailing how to kill with cyanide. He was convicted of extortion and served 13 years, but authorities ultimately concluded he was just a con man operating out of New York. No physical ties to the Chicago murders whatsoever. Then we have Roger Arnold. He was an amateur chemist working at a food warehouse. He actually kept cyanide in his home and reportedly talked about killing people with a mysterious white powder. He was investigated thoroughly, but the evidence? Entirely circumstantial. He was never charged, and he died in 2008. Talk about the ultimate frustration for investigators. So this brings us to a really pivotal question in our explainer today. How do you stop a killer who leaves no trace? Think about it. The police couldn't find a single fingerprint. They couldn't catch the killer on camera. Retail security cameras barely existed back then. And they obviously couldn't predict which store would be hit next. The investigation literally hit a brick wall. Because of that, the burden of public safety suddenly shifted away from law enforcement and landed squarely on the manufacturer. We transition now to look at the monumental corporate response that followed. To stop the dying, Johnson & Johnson executed a massive, completely unprecedented maneuver. They launched a nationwide recall of 31 million bottles of Tylenol and immediately halted every single TV ad for the product. Instead of downplaying the incident or trying to do some quiet, behind-the-scenes batch recall, they went completely public. They explicitly prioritized human safety over profits. Pulling 31 million bottles from shelves across the country established what is still to this day considered the absolute modern gold standard for corporate crisis management. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer financial hit the company willingly took to protect the public. Back in 1982, that massive recall cost Johnson & Johnson over $100 million. If we adjust that for inflation, you're looking at today's equivalent of an incredible $330 million. They absorbed that unimaginable cost simply to pull the product, make sure absolutely no more tainted bottles could be purchased, and figure out how to totally redesign their packaging to win back consumer trust.
And the pharmaceutical industry did exactly that. They introduced a multi-layered defense system. Let's walk through these physical barriers chronologically because it's brilliant. Step 1, they glued the outer carton flap tightly shut so you'd immediately know if the box had been opened. Step 2, they added a tight plastic shrink wrap right around the neck of the bottle. And finally, step 3, they placed a strong foil seal covering the mouth of the bottle right under the cap. Today, we completely take these steps for granted, right? Whether we're opening a bottle of medicine or just a jar of peanut butter. But in 1982, these barriers were revolutionary. They were explicitly designed to make it entirely impossible for a casual predator to open a bottle, poison it, and put it back unnoticed.
The packaging alone wasn't enough. The medicine itself had to evolve. We had to move away from the massive vulnerability of those easy-to-open, two-piece gelatin capsules from '82. Because those could so easily be pulled apart and filled with poison, the industry basically phased them out. In their place, we got modern security, the solid compressed caplets that we are all so familiar with today. These solid pills are incredibly difficult to hollow out or lace with any kind of foreign substance. So the sheer public terror caused by those vulnerable capsules directly forced the engineering of this much safer, tamper-resistant format. And the legacy of the Chicago Tylenol murders didn't stop at the pharmacy counter. It went all the way to the halls of Congress. In 1983, the government officially passed what became known as the Tylenol Bill. This was a monumental piece of legislation that firmly cemented product tampering as a distinct, incredibly severe federal felony. These tragic events permanently changed global pharmaceutical packaging, sure, but they also transformed how the law ruthlessly prosecutes anyone who even attempts to compromise the safety of consumer goods. It was a massive, lasting shift in our entire regulatory landscape. So, after everything we've looked at today, we are left to ponder the enduring mystery of this tragic cold case. The killer behind the deaths of those 7 innocent people in Chicago simply vanished. They slipped into history entirely unpunished. Yet, their terrifying legacy inadvertently rebuilt global consumer safety from the ground up. Literally every time you struggle to peel off a foil seal or break a plastic neck ring on a bottle, you are interacting with the direct result of 1982. But it leaves us with a provocative thought to end on. With all the permanent changes to our security and all the ingenious barriers we've built since then,
Could an invisible predator ever find a way to bypass our modern safeguards again? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.